I'd love to hear some of your wisdom on how to develop true, deep, and lasting self-esteem.
Well, what you're really talking about is seeing yourself through the eyes of Source. It's how your inner being feels about you. But you have to practice the vibrational frequency of your inner being, or at least not contradict it. And it comes from feeling how bad it feels to feel bad about yourself until you decide that you'd rather not think any thoughts about yourself than feel bad. But you know what we've noticed is the swiftest path to self-loving? Loving others. If someone who is all tuned in, tapped in, turned on, has been holding you as their object of attention, and you felt that coordinated with their inner being, love flooding all over you, that goes a long way. That feels so good to be loved like that. Of course, we don't want you to get dependent upon it because they have other things to think about other than you. And if they look away from you for a moment, you might feel like the puppet that someone has let go of the strings. But we are saying that it does feel good to have someone focus upon you while they are in alignment with their own inner being. But then, as you move about, if you are not someone who has that experience, so that you sort of get some momentum going about not only what it feels like to be loved, but to witness a loving person. If you have the wonderful experience of being around someone who loves easily, you can pick up some really good habits from someone who loves easily, who criticizes rarely, who wants so much to love that they just find a way that they usually do, or they withdraw. In other words, they don't stay focused in a conversation that doesn't feel good to them. So if you've had that wonderful experience, some might call it good fortune, we would, then you might have some momentum going where that's sort of the way that you want to be. But so many people in this diverse world don't really have so much of that going on. So then we say to you, if you don't have that going on, if you haven't had the advantage of having loving people up close to you, and it's true of so many who haven't, and they say, I'm going to develop some self-esteem because I heard it in the self-esteem class that it was good for me to like myself. The hardest thing for you to do is to turn that focus back at you, because you've been with you so much. You take yourself almost everywhere you go. You've practiced discouraging thoughts about yourself, mostly because you've held desires, not known how to line up with them, so you haven't accomplished your desires, so you have proclaimed yourself ineffective or not good at something, or you've taken the word of other insecure people who look at you in their insecurity, and all they do is reflect insecurity all over you, and so you get those momentums going. And so for most people, to turn that lens of looking back on themselves, they often see more that they don't want to see than that they do want to see, only because they've been practicing that longer. But what we've noticed is, if you will turn that looker around and start looking outward into your environment, and we always say, look where it's easiest. Look at your pets. Look at the beasts of the planet. Look at nature. Look at something that will only respond to you with positive response as you look. And then as you look outward, and your determination is to find positive aspects. Once you are good at finding positive aspects in others, then you have a better chance of finding some positive aspects in yourself. Do you know what priming a pump means? Priming the pump means focusing in a way that gets it rolling. And once it's rolling, then you don't have to keep calling it. In other words, there's a momentum that calls it. So the laws of the universe are already that momentum, but you have to get focused in the direction of it before the momentum can be yours. You see what we're getting at? So by focusing on the positive aspects of others, it primes your pump to begin to find the positive aspects of yourself.
What do you have to say about the idea that maybe some people have early childhood traumas or big impact life experiences that really push their self-perception in a specific direction? like maybe a parent leaving when you're a young child or something like that.
We know these things happen. But when you understand that all of your power is now, let's say something happened like that 20 years ago. Well, by now, it wouldn't be affecting you at all if you hadn't brought it forward 19 years ago, 18 years ago, 17 years ago, 16 years ago, yesterday, and even now. Things don't stay active without your attention upon them. That's why looking for positive aspects, you could even eventually, we wouldn't start with this person, find someone that you have a lot of awareness of things about them that you don't care for, and you could focus with the intent to see positive aspects to such a degree that the negative aspects that you once experienced would become so distant in your vibration that you would never experience them again. You have the power to extract from any particle of the universe exactly what you are focused upon, because there's no assertion. Nobody can thrust their vibrational beingness into your experience. It's all your attraction of it. It's law of attraction, not law of assertion.
So when some certain kinds of healers say that someone has an underlying, unhealed wound, emotional wound that keeps cropping back up, you're saying that the only reason why that keeps coming up is because it's...
You keep picking the scab off of it. You keep picking the scab off of it so it never heals. If you'd leave it alone, it would go away. If you would replace it with the beautiful things of this day that your inner being is focused upon, and that your inner being is only focused upon, your inner being never looks back to that. And that's why when you do, it hurts again. And when you do, it hurts again. And it's not hurting because you're looking back. It's hurting because you're looking where your inner being isn't. You're looking at what your inner being is not looking at. You're denying yourself all of the resources of your source by choosing something that your source would never choose to give attention to in this moment. Don't you like knowing that?
And so that's why you say it's better to look at anything in this day that has been positive, because that's where my inner being is leading my attention, because that's the path of least resistance to healing and to...
Anything. Look for positive aspects, and if you can't find any, take a nap. Or meditate. Do anything you can to quiet your mind, to stop the momentum.
When you talk about looking at somebody else who's a good example of loving freely, I feel like I have that in my spouse, and he's very generous with his love. And sometimes I feel like we'll be in a social situation and something will be triggering to me, and so I'll look to him for validation or course correction, which of course is not a very fair game.
Well, we know it's nice to be with someone that makes you feel good like that, but you'd be better off if you weren't, because then you'd figure out how to take care of this. But as long as there's someone else who will always offer it to you, then you could just always look to them. And they're fickle, because they might be connected and therefore a good source of that for you, and they might not. And it's not their job to be that for you.
Right. So in a situation where you feel triggered, what's the best thing? To step out of the room and go reconnect, or go eat a cookie?
This is the most important thing to understand about this momentum. It's your preparation before you've stepped into the room that matters most, not what you do with your knee-jerk reaction after you step in. Because once you're having a knee-jerk reaction, that's kind of where it's going to go for a while. Now, something could change it. In other words, the ship alarm could go off and you could all jump overboard. That would change your... Kidding. In other words, sometimes things happen that would distract, but usually not. Usually once it starts tipping, you're just sort of going to have to ride it out. It's like that car out of gear that we were talking about. And in the early stages, you have some control. But once it gets rolling, you don't have much control in the moment, because this thought leads to that and that thought leads to that. And before you know it, you're evoking responses from other people, because in every room you're in, there is the potential of going with the flow of your discordant thought or going with the flow of your aligned thought. And so we wouldn't try too hard to turn it around once it's gone wonky. It's sort of like, you're carrying that big stack of books and it's way over your head and you're doing really good and it starts to tip. What are you going to do? What are you going to do, really? You're going to let it fall and you're going to pick it up and you're going to start again, but you're not going to keep it from tipping once it starts to tip. The law of gravity has got hold of it and you're not going to bring it back. And law of attraction is pretty much the same way.
And so the best thing to do is just to do better next time, prepave the way next time.
The best thing to do is to feel the knee jerk, acknowledge that you didn't like it. You might even say to yourself, why? I let my momentum get away from me, and I want to do better next time. But then that's not the time to go work on it, because when you're into that defensive mode, you'll just keep poking around at it until you'll just make it more substantial. The best thing to do is just to do your best to mentally and or physically and all of the above just walk away from it. The best thing is to distract yourself from it. But when we say to you, think a different thought, that's really not a fair statement to you, because law of attraction won't let you think a different thought. So that's why we say just relax into it. You know what we'd really like you to do? Not be mad at yourself for having a negative thought. Not be mad at yourself for having a negative response. Call it a step one moment. Look for the value in it. Say to yourself, well, I know what I don't want. What is it that I do want? And sometimes you can make that pivot. Depends on how big of a hot button you've pushed. If it's just something sort of new, you might be able to gain control in your experience by pivoting, which just means don't want that, do want that. Or if there are enough others around you that are already feeling that way that you can look at their shining eyes and feel the wholeness of who they are, you might catch yourself before you go too far. But don't worry about it if you don't. That's the most important thing. Don't beat up on yourself. That's the thing that erodes your self-esteem more than all other things. Being mad at yourself about something. That's why we say give the credit to law of attraction and appreciate that the contrast is serving you, and acknowledge at least that there was a rocket of desire, even though you can't see it and maybe can't follow it in this moment. And then most important, look for reasons to prepare yourself going into something. Don't just get up and clumsily walk into an environment without any vibrational preparation. Tune yourself to the frequency of your inner being and then walk in. And when you're looking at this room full of whatever it is through the eyes of Source, you're going to find only those things that are of benefit to you, because that's where your inner being is looking. That's why we say, did you find your dash cards? Under the influence? Under the influence of what? Under the influence of Source, under the influence of my inner being, under the influence of being satisfied, under the influence of being tuned in, under the influence of the wholeness of who I am. That's why we like step 5 so much. Step 5 is having a step 1 moment and acknowledging the value in the step 1 moment. If you go to a buffet and there are things that you don't want to eat, and you accidentally get some of it on your plate, and you get it into your mouth, and you say, I really didn't like that. You might even spit it out. We don't think you're going to put it in your mouth again anytime soon, or anything really that looks anything like it. But with your thoughts, when you get a thought in your head that feels awful, why would you put it back in there? Why would you put it back in there? You didn't like it the first time or the second time or the third time. Didn't like it when you heard it from others. Didn't like how it felt. What's up with that? And it might be where this question started. It might be that you're already so mad at yourself that this terrible thought feels normal. And that's the thing that meditation will help you out of. That's the thing that looking for positive aspects will help you out of. You want to begin practicing the resonance of the thoughts that your inner being is thinking. And once you do that, then those other thoughts that under the influence of something other than Source will feel off to you. And then you're more likely to catch it in the early stages.
That's incredibly powerful. Thank you. That's
yes,
what I was
indeed.
looking for.